Hi, my name is Sihong Peng. I'm your host for the Minepreneur podcast show, where I interview successful entrepreneurs and in hopes to inspire more and more people in the corporate world or where they're starting up to think like an entrepreneur and make a difference in their world. So joining me today is Naeem Ahmed. Naeem is the founder and CEO of Clickmox based in Sudbury, Canada. Clickmox is best known for its industry-leading drone survey system for underground mining application. In the underground mining world, often we face the challenges of no light or very low visibility, and there's no GPS signal for navigation. So today we'll learn how Naeem and his team tackled the challenge and built a successful business on it. And his work even gets noticed by NASA recently. And we also learn how a theoretical physicist with a intrinsic interest in general relativity ends up in the dark world of underground mining. So theoretical physics, number one, the most prestigious university in Pakistan, and Snow Lab for particle detection. All those experiences are really fascinating to me. So welcome, Naeem.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so as Sihong said that, I'm basically, I started as a theoretical physicist and then, went through different cycles of working in different fields of physics, starting with general relativity all the way to astroparticle physics and then moved to the mining industry.
Wow, that's quite a span of experience.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, what was your Clickmox revenue for the past 12 months?
Well, we have actually surpassed $1 million.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So and we are on our way to go 3 times this year.
3 times this year?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very ambitious goal.
Yeah.
And very great growth.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been very fortunate to have been able to build a good clientele, the people who trust us and our products and also our services.
Wow. So this year we expect over 3 million of sales. That's great. So remind me when you started the business.
Well, we started in 2014.
2014, and now it's only 5 years, and you're into the 7-figure league already.
Yes.
Congrats.
That's, thank you very much.
Great job there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where are these revenues from? Because you were saying this year you expect 3 times of the growth.
Yeah. So in previous years, most of our revenue was coming from services, and so now our products have matured. And we have actually started selling our products. So that's where most of the revenue is coming from now. So we are actually making more sales than before. And that's the growth we are looking at continuing in the next year.
Maybe tell us a little bit about your products and services that you mentioned earlier. What products and what services do you offer for our audience members that probably don't know Clickmox all that well yet?
Okay, so we have been focusing primarily on underground mining, right? So there was a need when we started working in this sector. We found out that there is a need of scanning and mapping of inaccessible areas, and there was no product that could efficiently, quickly, and safely scan and map, for example, open stopes or caved-in areas.
Right.
So we came up with a drone-based solution and a laser scanner, a lidar that we designed ourselves, that was able to perform these scans while the drone is moving. Right. So the traditional systems where the system has to be stationary was not really useful for that kind of scanning and mapping. So that was our kind of niche. That's what. Yeah.
Right,
And
right. So you can send a drone in without having, putting any person in jeopardy or unsafe conditions because
yeah,
of the possibility of, say, ground failure or things
exactly,
like that. Okay.
exactly. So safety is the biggest thing, of course, and then you know, if you can faithfully reconstruct a stope, it has a high value for mining operations.
Right.
Right. So we provided services in this sector, and then we were able to very quickly go in other sectors in the underground mine as well, even general purpose scanning and mapping, because the lidars or the laser scanners that we developed were much faster and quicker and much easier to use than the traditional laser scanners that were being used in the mining industry.
Right. That's a
Right.
very impressive
Yeah.
research and development done at Clickmox in-house here, but
Yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit later. Uh, But when you started out, Clickmox, it didn't start with a drone survey. I guess in
Uh,
2014, drone wasn't really that mature for industrial applications.
no.
So maybe tell us about when you first started. What did you start with?
So we started with a project for Grasberg in Indonesia, and they wanted us to advise them on how to do convergence monitoring in pillars of the block cave mine,
Right.
right? And we came up with two different solutions. One was the solution that was based on geotechnical monitoring sensors, and which was a little bit expensive for them. And the other solution was using a laser scanner.
Right.
So the idea is that you do a scan, and then you come back and do another scan and make a comparison. Make a difference calculation to see
If there's a
if there
convergence in
has
the
been
ground.
or not. Yeah.
Okay, I
So
see.
we started, since at that time we didn't have our own scanner, right? So
Right.
we started with an existing scanner, an existing product out of a company in UK, and but very quickly we realized that there were a lot of limitations of that product. And we thought that, instead of going to that company and asking them to make a product that would fit our requirements, why not build our own scanner?
I see.
So that's
Okay,
how
that's how you started.
we came up with this idea of a
Mm.
new lidar.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
We'll actually talk in detail about that a little later. But you said in our pre-interview that when growing up, you didn't expect yourself to be doing business at all. So,
No.
and now you have built this very successful business in such a short amount of time, I would say. So what inspired you to start, or what was in your mind when you decided to start Clickmox?
Well, of course, I never thought of starting a business. I always wanted to, when I was growing up, to be, to work in the sciences, in
Right.
pure sciences, physics and mathematics. And but then, when I came to Sudbury and I started working in the mining sector, there were a lot of problems especially in the underground mining sector, that I was able to identify, and I thought that I can potentially solve those problems, right?
With your
And
knowledge and skills.
yeah,
Right.
with the knowledge of sensor development, with the system development, process development, mathematics. And if you're doing a job for some other company, you don't really have that kind of you know
Autonomy.
autonomy,
Yeah.
and freedom to do whatever you want, right? So I thought that let's 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 do what I want to do myself and see how it goes.
Right, right. So you have this idea that yeah, maybe I can solve those problems, but running a business is never only about having an idea. There are so many other things that could go wrong. That's why probably stats show that a majority of business when they started, they fail within probably the first couple of years. Were you
Yeah.
fearful, or what did you have any doubts in your mind before you
Of
actually started?
Yeah, well, of course, I had fears. I had never done a business before, right? So I didn't know what it would take to start and run a business.
Right, right.
But then, of course, Canada is a very business friendly country. So there is
Okay.
a lot of help and advice available in the government sector and
Okay.
also in the private sector. So I was able to, use some of the resources available for businesses to start the business. And of course, the biggest hurdle in starting any business is the availability of cash. Mm.
Right.
So that was something which was a struggle. Of course, was a very very big struggle in the beginning, but then once we were able to go over that obstacle or the potential, then it became much easier later on. And yes, yeah, you're right. I had the doubts. I didn't know what will happen, but my brother, I consulted him, and he's a businessman, and he said the that you can do whatever, but just don't give up. It's the persistence that makes
Okay,
people
persistence.
make
Right,
makes
right.
people successful, right? And he said that it's not going to be easy. Nobody's going to come to you and say that okay, you have this problem, I'll solve it. You'll have to solve your problems, right?
Right, right.
But
I
then
hear
just
you.
keep on doing what you want to do. Yeah.
Right. So he does your brother also run a successful business in Canada? Or?
No, no, he's in Pakistan. He's
Oh,
not in
okay.
Canada.
I
Yeah,
see.
but he's
Yeah.
running his own business.
So I
Yeah.
guess the business is probably in your genes. The
Yeah, you could say that, but my father was not a business person. He was in military. He was in Air Force.
oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
wow. I
yeah.
didn't know
So
that. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So in that respect, no, of course. And most of my cousins and others in Pakistan and also abroad, they're all doing their jobs, right?
Right, right,
Nobody that I know is in a business except for my brother,
right. I
right?
see. So what do
And
you think are the core values that you and probably your brother that have learned from your father?
well, first of all, you have to be very honest. You
Right,
have to be honest to yourself. You have to be honest to your clients. This
right,
is the utmost important thing. And the second thing is that you have to believe in your products,
right.
because if you don't believe in your products yourself, then you won't be able to be a
Make others
successful
believe. Right.
others believe. And so together these two things are I think the core, very very important for any business to be successful.
Agreed.
Yeah, yeah,
That's excellent. Okay, so maybe let's talk about a little bit about your pre-entrepreneurial life. I was really fascinated when we were doing the pre-interview, and I
yeah,
discovered so much about you. Uh, so maybe let's start with your university. So you were admitted to one of the most prestigious nuclear engineering program in Pakistan,
yeah, yeah,
and
that's
you
good.
were. Tell me about that. So you were one of the how many students that were got?
Yeah, well, a lot of people, a lot of students apply for that, about 10,000, and they select 100 out of those. So you have to
Wow.
go through, written test, and there is and a very comprehensive interview process that you have to go through, and then they select. And then even after that, there is a 50% failure rate in that, even after getting to that university. About more than half of the students, they actually fail
Fail or
within the
quit.
first year or
Wow.
quit. Yeah, a lot of them quit as well, because it's extremely hard. Extremely
Okay.
hard. It's
Yeah, yeah, I can
very
imagine.
demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But those
Mm.
are the top students, the smartest kids in the country that got
Yeah,
admitted. And then you still need to work that hard to get
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
program. Wow.
yeah. Well, I mean, smartest, the ones who really want to get into the nuclear field
Right.
out of those. But there are, of course, other kids in chemistry and physics who are
Right.
probably smarter than them.
But
Right,
to
of
me,
course.
nuclear engineering is like a rocket science that's requires so much brain power.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So, what do you think was some of the lessons that you learned from that experience, the university life?
Hard,
So competitive, so hard work.
very competitive, and you just keep on working hard. That's the first lesson they teach, right?
Right, right,
And so that the curriculum was designed to make students work hard.
right, right.
The
I
way it was
see.
designed, and um, they would teach physics, mathematics, and the of course the systems engineering,
Right.
the electronics, the nuclear, all those different courses about
Okay.
nuclear physics and
Right.
nuclear engineering, how to design a nuclear power plant core,
What? Right, right.
how to do transient analysis. So there was a lot that we had to learn.
Very hardcore
Yeah,
engineering science training.
training, and so
So
I
you
learned a lot.
graduated
Yeah.
with distinction, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get yeah, distinction gold medal from there. Yes.
Oh wow! Out
Yeah.
of so many students, you got a
Mm.
gold medal. But what happened after?
After that, yeah. So after that, I was actually, I got a faculty position in the same institute, so I started teaching there, right? And then my boss, he once said that, okay, well, I think you should go abroad. You should go to U.S., right? And he said that there is a professor coming, and he wants a student, and I have recommended your name, right? And why don't you go there and study there? So I said that, well, I mean, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave my family here.
Right.
So that professor came and he actually offered me, and I said no to him from yeah, Albany. And later on I kind of regretted that. But then after about a year working there, I said that, well, nuclear is probably not the field that I want to continue working on
Right.
for various reasons. I did not feel that creating nuclear waste is good for environment, good for people. So and of course a lot of people disagreed with me and still do, but that's how I thought that I didn't really want to continue. So I talked to my boss and he said that, well, why don't you then get the scholarship and go and do PhD somewhere in the field that you like,
Right.
right?
Right. So
Which is
what's the
physics.
field that you chose?
Physics.
Physics, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a government scholarship program, and you had to write a GRE and this and that for that, an interview. So I was lucky enough to get that scholarship as well. So I went to Germany to Siegen University, and then I wanted to do theoretical physics, right? Because
Right.
that's what I still am passionate about.
Right.
Right. But then they said that, the professor over there, he said that he would recommend going to experimental high energy physics
Right.
because there were, very little job opportunities in theory. And the funding for theory has been in the decline for the past couple of decades, actually
Oh,
more than
okay.
that. So that it has been unfortunate all over the world. So that's why I did
So you went
PhD.
to Germany, you did your studies there, and
Yeah,
then so after you finished your studies there, you worked at the institute. Tell me about that.
yeah. So before I was finished, I was offered a position at Max Planck Institute for
Okay, so for
physics.
people that don't know about Max Planck Institute of Physics, so I did a little bit of research
Yeah.
online. So Max Planck Institute for Physics is actually a physics institute in Mully, Germany, that specializes in high energy physics and astroparticle physics. And in October 1917, the institute was officially founded in Berlin, and Albert Einstein was
Mhm.
actually the first head director. So very impressive, very prestigious
Yeah.
institute there for
It's
sure.
and I was very lucky to get that position and over there, and there I had to I was working on very high end um, electronic development, as well as some of the experimental particle physics. So I was a part of the group that was working on the Hera B experiment at Daisy in Hamburg.
Right.
And so I worked there for about a year. It was an excellent experience, very good. Yeah, it was very.
That's excellent.
Uh,
So, what was your biggest learning from that? You mentioned electronics and then software, maybe.
yeah. So the electronics that we were working on over there was fairly complicated. It's very deep analog pipelines and
Right.
digital circuitry that was very challenging to develop. So we were developing that electronics for the Hirabi experiment, for the central tracker of the experiment. Um,
And that was in the fairly early stage of computer or internet or software
yeah,
sensor interface, right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
That
So
is so cool. So you did some pioneering work in terms of
yeah.
interfacing hardware or sensors with software and controls.
Yeah, and then there were, we were working on the zeroth, first, and second level triggers for the electronics, because what happens is that when you have a particle antiparticle collision, you get a lot of particles and you can't really analyze all the particles.
Right.
So you have to work on triggers
Right.
to remove the
The,
data that you
the
do not
noise.
want
Yeah.
to
Right.
analyze. So those triggers, because the collisions happen very very fast, so you're looking at sub nanosecond and sometimes femtosecond timing circuitry,
Right.
right? So very challenging electronics, as well as the software.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That reminds me
right.
of my physics and chemistry from
Yeah,
university.
yeah,
That's so
yeah,
cool. So
yeah.
later, then you went on to work in the States before you actually bumped into the small town called Sudbury.
Sudbury, yeah, that's right. It was been quite a journey. So yeah, so I was offered a position at Fermilab, in the U.S.
Right.
And Fermilab is in the U.S. Actually all over the world, is one of the premier institutes of experimental high energy physics.
Right. That was actually the largest high energy lab in the world until I think
So
2007, 2008, when
yeah,
they had the new one in Europe.
yeah, the Large Hadron Collider (LHC).
Right.
So
Right.
before LHC, this was the highest energy proton antiproton collider.
Right. So what
Uh,
did you do there?
so I was actually hired by a Dutch research organization called FOM,
Right.
and they sent me to the US, and I was in charge of the safety system of, again, the central tracker of the system.
Right.
And my job was to first design the safety system, right, and then kind of remain in charge of that until the end of my contract or the experiment.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see. And that's when someone actually approached you from Sudbury's Snow Lab.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah. So somebody came to Sudbury, and um, I was showing them around, and then they said that, let's go for a cup of coffee. And
Before that, you probably were wondering, where's Sudbury? Where's
I had no idea what Sudbury was.
right,
No
right,
idea. I had actually already had two offers, one from California, other from Michigan, for jobs. that I was considering, both of those jobs at that point. And the guy came and he said that, one of the professors actually, and he said that, why don't you, have you ever heard of Sudbury? I said, no, I have no idea. And
Of
he
course
said,
not.
well, why don't you come and have a look, and maybe you would like to come and work with us,
Right.
right? And I said, well, okay, why not?
Yeah.
So I came to Sudbury, and I really hated the city. It was winter, right? So
Yeah.
what can you expect?
Right.
So and then I loved the lab. Lab
Right.
was awesome.
So I guess that's
Because
what it kept you here, even though I think you mentioned in our pre-interview you took a 50% pay cut
yeah,
from Fermilab.
yeah, I had to take 50% pay cut.
That's a
And
pretty tough decision.
yeah. But I talked to my wife. She's always been very, very supportive. And I said that, well, I mean, I can take this job at Michigan or, California. We can,
Or we can go
about this
north to
uh,
Canada.
uh, colder climate.
Right.
And then we won't be able to afford two cars, right? Anymore. And we will probably live in a smaller apartment. And right.
Right.
And she said that, well, I mean, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you like to do, right, then let's go for it. I have no problems with that.
Great wife.
Right.
Right.
So we came here, and I loved it, actually, and some when I came here, somebody at the lab said that, well, I mean, Sudbury is a city that grows on you, right? And then he said, like fungus. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so I guess that's Snow Lab. It's basically a neutrino observation laboratory located underground here at a local mine in Sudbury. So I guess that's when you first got exposed to underground or to mining.
yeah, that's correct. That was my first experience in an underground mine. Was a very rough environment, of
Right.
course, right? And but the lab itself was, of course, one of the cleanest places on earth, the
Right.
snow lab.
Right. Because they
So
want to have absolutely zero interference or pollution.
zero contamination,
Right.
zero pollution, right? So I mean, you go through that extremely rough environment. You walk through that, drift or tunnel, and then you go to the cleanest lab
In the
you
world.
imagine in the world. It was quite an experience, right?
Wow, that's
And yeah,
that's
I loved
cool.
it. Yeah.
So, but then soon the experiment came to an end at the
Yeah.
Snow Lab.
Yeah, in about 5 years, I worked there for 5 years, and the experiment ended. And then I talked to somebody in Sudbury, and who he was running a company that was developing high-end technologies for
Right.
underground mines. Well, actually, for the mining, for the future mining.
Right.
Okay,
Some sort
right.
of a communication device.
Yeah, so they had different projects, and one of them was a project in which they were trying to see if it is possible to communicate using visible light in
Right.
underwater.
Right.
Right? And the reason why they wanted to do was because they wanted to see if it is possible to safely do mining underwater.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
because right now all the systems that we have use cables, and those cables tangle up very
Right.
quickly, and it is very difficult to have high throughput using sonar systems,
Right.
because those are highly limited in bandwidth.
Right.
So yeah, we were lucky enough. We developed the system very, very quickly. That visible light based, because there's a very narrow
Spectrum.
range of the spectrum. It
Right.
starts from blue all the way to green,
Right.
and that where the attenuation in water is the least.
Right.
So
So you can
that's
travel
yeah.
far. Right.
Yeah, so that's why we see water as either blue or green, right? Because
Right.
those are the colors that go, deepest in water. So we used green LEDs actually to build that communication system, and we
Okay.
were able to get 10 megahertz, 10 megabit per second actually.
Oh wow,
Of
that's a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah, we were actually transferring video underwater and sound and video and yeah,
Actually, I think I've seen one of those devices that you mentioned at
yeah,
the facility there, and then
yeah,
it's just amazing.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
of the ingenuity and
yeah,
communication technology that put into place.
yeah.
But then after that project, the you moved on to your next role.
Yeah. So there was a company called Mining Technologies International,
Right.
and at that time they were the biggest manufacturer of underground mining machinery in Canada. Fairly big company, Sudbury based, but they had offices in other countries as well. Um, so I was made in charge of the automation department in that company, because what they wanted to do is to move away from manually operated machinery and actually turn them into a autonomous, semi-autonomous or autonomous. For example, drill boom jumbos,
Right.
right? So they started this program, and they gave me the charge of that. So we worked on, so that was a lot of interesting work in robotics,
Right.
right? Because
Machine sensor software interfacing.
yeah, and also mathematics for robotics, right?
Absolutely,
So
the
it's a lot of
core behind. Yeah.
or inverse kinematics, right?
Right.
So because inverse kinematics is not that easy, because you don't really get a unique solution, right? You get multiple solutions, and then you have to figure out which solution to go for. So
Right.
right, and so we were working on our second project. Was to develop a fully autonomous 9-axis drill boom jumbo.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we said that, the first step would be to develop the mathematics for that. And the second step would be to do simulations.
Right.
And the third step would be to actually build the system,
Right. Which
right?
is a very cost-effective approach
Yeah,
to tackle automation.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we built the mathematics, of course, and then when the mathematics was done, then we did the simulations.
Right.
We wrote the simulation code. And then when that was done, we wrote the actual controls code. And right when we were getting ready to implement on the machine, the company went into financial trouble, and it was bought by another company,
Yeah, I think it's
right?
bought by Joy
By
Global.
Joy Global, and now it's another company that bought Joy Global as well.
Right.
So at that point, I said that, well, I mean, I've been going from one job to the next, right? And I know that I can contribute a lot to the mining industry, because there are problems that I know exist, and not many people are looking at solving them. So how about I start my own business, right? So
But
that,
let's pause for a second there.
yeah,
So basically, you were let go 3 times, uh, not willingly, but because of something that's totally beyond your control.
yeah.
And uh, also, you mentioned it was a very emotional moment when you were let go by MTI, because something happened in the family.
Yeah. It was an emotional moment. Yeah. And I wasn't expecting that, because on the same, actually, the day before, I was in a meeting with the owner of the company, right?
Right.
And we were discussing future plans and
Right.
what are we going to do and how we are going to do that. And the next day, I was visited by the manager of the whole engineering, and he said that we are in a deep financial trouble, and we just have to close the whole automation department. Actually, they laid off a lot of people who are who they thought were working on future projects.
Right.
They were let go. Some of them were there in the company for a very long time as well. So it was a very emotional moment also, because on the same day we had a death in the family. Actually, my mother-in-law, and so it was a difficult time for
Right.
sure.
So yeah, it was very emotional. I guess
Yeah,
that's probably one of the lowest moments in your career, in your
yeah,
life.
yeah,
Because I remember when I was actually after I graduated from university here in Canada. Before that, I did my bachelor's degree in China,
yeah,
and I started to look for a job, just one job, and I wasn't really trying to pick, location, or as long as someone offered me a job, I would be happy. But I kept searching, kept searching. It took me months, and I probably applied for hundreds of jobs.
yeah,
But there's basically nothing, no advance. I probably got a one interview or two here and there,
yeah,
but nothing materialized. And I remember very vividly this one night I was going to the CIM conference in Montreal,
yeah,
and then hoping to find some opportunities there. And I was staying at this family hotel run by this gentleman, and I was staying in a room with 12 beds,
yeah,
basically like a university dorm. I was sleeping in one of the bed. I was looking at the ceiling. I was like, "Wow, this is so hard." And language is not my strongest suit, and in a social setting, I can talk to people because I don't have the same cultural background, and
mm,
I was just doubting myself because really, am I capable of doing anything?
mm,
And I remember that was really hard because I totally have no control over what I want to do next.
yeah,
Yeah, so I can totally relate to
yeah,
you when
yeah.
you said whenever someone want to let you go, they didn't even think twice.
Yeah, yeah, that's how, you know and one thing that you were asking in the beginning, that um, about the business and how it should be run. And there's one more thing, that for some reason, um, people have been forgetting that it's people who actually make businesses successful. It's the
Right,
workers, right?
right,
And that, for some reason, the empathy and the humanity that we should have in our companies, we are for some reason we are losing that, right?
right,
and
right.
and and this is something that I have experienced, and also while talking to some of my peers in other businesses, that for some reason, people are being looked at as a computer, for
As a
example, right?
number or
As a
computer, yeah.
number, right?
Right,
So what they think is that there are plenty of people available to do anything, right? So it doesn't matter. What we forget is that it's people, right? They
exactly.
have their own families, right? They might not perform on a certain day, or in a certain week, or in a certain month,
Right,
because they might have some problems going on,
right,
some
exactly.
issues they
Yeah,
might be dealing with, and we have to be considerate about
right.
that, right?
That's
And this is something, I think, back in the olden days, there was a concept of building loyalty in business,
right,
and that loyalty is being lost now, right? Because the concept is very simple, right? If somebody, if an employee wants to cheat you, right, they will find a million ways to do that, right? So what I tell, ask everybody, also my peers, is that when you are running a business, keep that in mind. Um, if somebody is deliberately trying to cheat you, or that is a different story, right? But you know if you can if you are letting somebody go so that you can make maybe $20,000 more in a year, that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense.
Right,
you
right. I
know
hear you. The human touch instead
yeah,
of just focusing on the numbers.
we are all family, right? I mean, I've been extremely fortunate to still have the same people who were there with me in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's one
Same.
of the major ingredients in
Yeah.
your success because the team that you started with
Yeah.
have been sticking with you
Yeah. Yeah.
since the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but having a great idea, having the values, skills, knowledge, I guess isn't really enough to build a business. And you've seen that at MTI, they have great ideas about mining automation. And I guess that was at the time when
Yeah.
only probably a handful other people have seen the future of automation in mining equipment. So they
Yeah.
have apparently the grand idea of automation, but they didn't survive the business world. So did that make you feel, you know, maybe should I
Well,
really start this?
I learned from their mistake,
Perfect.
right? I mean, because I was sitting with the management all the time, so I had a very clear idea of what the mistakes that were being made. And I knew that, for any business to survive, as you said, just the idea is not enough,
Right.
right? You have to execute very precisely and very, thoughtfully,
Right.
right? And also, you need to understand that uh, any business requires revenue to
Right.
survive,
Exactly.
right? So you have to find ways to
So,
to sell, to
right.
provide services to increase your revenue. And that's another thing that I learned, that there are some companies, they start with a grand idea, right? And they get some kind of funding and they start and develop something, but it takes them 4, 5, 7, 8 years to go to market, right?
Right.
And during that time, they by that time they have used up all of their resources, all of the employees are not happy. So that's what I learned, right? So I said that, okay, the best way to move forward is to, of course, keep on doing the research and development, but then also provide services so that we can generate revenue, we can
Right.
bring money into the
Excellent.
company.
I think that's a very critical lesson here. So a lot of the times we tend to, try to develop something that's perfect before we can even talk about it or show
Yeah.
anyone. But you took a very different approach. You start with something as long as initially it can work, serve a certain clientele.
Yeah.
Then you go show it to your clients, and then I think that's a very agile
Yeah.
approach
Yeah.
when it comes to business dealing. But
Yeah.
I want to ask you, so when you started a business, there is apparently the execution you mentioned, but also accounting, legal, finance, funding, and all those jazz, the fun
Yeah.
stuff, if you will, that you have to take care of. Did
Yeah.
you have someone to guide you through this, or you just kind of, yeah, I'm gonna figure it out
Uh,
myself?
Unfortunately, not. I just had to, these things I had to actually figure out myself. Of course, there were resources available from the government sector. But in terms of accounting, for example, right? Um, in the beginning, I was pretty much doing everything myself
Right,
because at that time we couldn't hire anybody to do that. Now, of course, there is a company that takes care of that, but at that time we had nothing, right? So along the way, it was good for me because then I was able to understand how all of this mumbo jumbo in accounting works. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any idea, right?
right,
So
right, right.
now, if they say that this is that and that is that, so now I can wrap my head around what they are trying to say. right?
Right.
So
I think that's probably typically a myth about when it comes to entrepreneurship. They tend to think, oh, I just want to quit my job so that I don't have to do this thing. I just want to do, I can do whatever I like or whatever I want. But it turns out that you actually need to take care of a lot of more things than you
yeah,
say we're taking a job. Because, like you
um,
said, if you don't do it, then nobody will.
nobody will.
Right.
And so,
So I can see from your pre-entrepreneurial life that you have been building this knowledge and skills, for example, how to work with sensors, how to work
yeah,
with interfacing,
yeah,
software,
software,
coding,
yeah,
mathematics.
yeah,
It seems you are building naturally towards this funnel of building a sensor-based technology, and I think that's how you started. You mentioned Clickmox. You started with the sensors for that mining company in
mm,
Indonesia.
yeah,
But then you found out that the sensor you got from off the shelf or the market didn't quite work well. So
yeah.
maybe walk us through that. Why is it not working well?
Okay, so there were two issues. So one of them was that it was a mobile scanner, but they wanted the mining company or us to send data on to upload data onto their server, and
Right.
they would process and then give us the map, right?
And how long does that process typically take?
Oh, the process is fast. Just takes maybe 10-15 minutes,
Okay.
provided you can upload
Upload the
data
data.
quickly. So now
And that
you're
was in the about 6, 7 years ago.
yeah, yeah, and the mine site, they were, and I think still are, using satellite internet
Oh,
connection, which is
so they have
extremely
very limited bandwidth and
very
very expensive.
very expensive.
Right.
So they just said that, okay, this is something that's not going to work for us at
Oh,
all.
okay. I see.
They said that, we just can't do that. And even if they could, they said that we will never send our data to any other server because of privacy issues.
Right, right,
Right.
right. I see.
So, I tried to negotiate with the company, but they had a business model where there was no other option.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So
Because they were probably the only one
the only
in the
ones.
market that
Yeah,
can do that at that time.
exactly.
Okay, so now that project stopped, then your income basically stopped.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
What next?
Well, the next, of course, we did have some, of course, there's some leftover money from that project.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Good financial planning there, by the way.
Yeah. And then we were fortunate enough to get another project from Glencore, from Nickel Rim South, to develop another technology for borehole scanning and clearance.
So
Uh,
how did you get to approach a big corporation like that, a big giant mining company?
yeah, so I met with the director of the mine. I called him up and set up an appointment, and I went to him, and I asked him, is there a problem that needs to be solved, right? That we can help you with. And he said, yes, of course, we do
That's
have a
very
problem.
brave, just to walk into
Yeah,
the director's office without even knowing the problems or without a
mm,
solution. You just
yeah,
want to understand their
understand.
struggles. Okay,
Yeah,
I see.
yeah. So we got that small project,
Right.
and so the first step was to build actually they designed the system. So we designed the system, and then the next step was to actually build the system. And but unfortunately, that building part funding didn't go forward because they had other priorities, and they said that we will come back to it later on. And right now, I would want you guys to work on a scanning and mapping system for overpasses
Right.
and stopes, right? And so actually, I received a letter from the director that this is our priority, so can you look at that instead of this for now? So we said that, okay, well, I mean, We can do scanning and mapping of an overpass, but we need to, mount a scanner on a drone and fly the drone in there.
Right.
And there was no system available at that point. All the scanning systems that were available were stationary scanning system,
Right.
except for the ones that we were using for the Grasberg project. But that system was way too heavy.
So the reason you thought you had to use a drone to carry the scanner was
Because nobody could go there, can go there, right, in a stope, right? So
right,
if you want to scan a stope, one way is to mount a scanner on a big post and slide the scanner in there, but
right.
then you get all kinds of
That's
shadowing
where
effect.
most companies,
Yeah,
plan their cavities monitoring survey,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a fixed point survey. Like you said, if
yeah,
there's a irregular shape within the stope, within the opening,
yeah.
and then because it's light based, you couldn't
Mhm.
get past that obstacle. Then you get
Exactly,
shadows. Okay,
exactly.
I see.
So we said that, well, I mean, we can use a drone, but there was no scanning system available that could carry, um, that can be carried with a drone. So we said that, well, let's build one ourselves then, right? So we set out, as we do in research and development, we set out, a very specific set of criteria that
Right.
needs to be fulfilled, and that's how much the weight should be, and the battery life and the accuracy and the resolution and the range and all of that. And then we started that project. And
So that project was funded by still the mining company Extrata.
no, well, that project was partly funded by some of the money that was for the other project,
Oh, okay.
and that was left over, because they said that they would like us to work on this project instead, right?
Okay.
So, and we were able at that point. We also, because we had already started providing services with the previous scanner from the other company,
Oh, so you were
right?
still providing services with the
Other scanner.
market scanner.
Also, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because we didn't have our own scanner at that
Right,
point.
right.
So it was only for the, I remember we got a project from an Australian company, but for a project to be done here in Sudbury, for example, and there were some other smaller projects here and there. One of the projects was in BC, British Columbia. But by that time, we had already developed the first version of our scanning system.
Well, before you jumped into that, the
Yeah,
development of your scanner, maybe let's step back a little bit. So, at that time, the funding basically has stopped from the Rio Tinto research fund, and then also the Extrata. I believe at some point the funding dried up because of the apparently the downturn in
yeah,
mining economy.
yeah,
Uh, but despite all that, you still decided to develop your own scanner.
yeah,
What
yeah.
what was the thinking behind? Where is the money
Well,
from?
well, the thinking was the survival instinct, right? We had to survive, and we knew that if we kept on going with the other scanning system, the limitations are going to be like that, unless they would change their business model, unless they redesign their system, which we had no control,
Right,
right? So, and we didn't really see a big market for that, even for services, right? And so it was kind of a matter of survival, that either we develop the system or we just go and do something else,
right,
right?
right. I see.
So, and we
But
knew.
yeah, you realize that probably would be the market need. But where's the funding from?
Well, I mean, like I said, there was some leftover money, of course, and then there was we were getting some small contracts here and there.
Okay, so at the same time,
Time,
you're
yeah,
getting revenue. Okay, by
yeah, yeah.
providing services.
I have always been extremely very, very aggressive in terms of going to clients.
Tell us
So
about that.
I would just pick up the phone and start calling people that, okay, we provide this service. Do you want something done? Most of the people would say no, but some would say yes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I see.
And so I actually calculated the response rate, which I when I talked to others, they said it was pretty good actually, 10%.
10%. So out of 10 phone calls, you'll close one deal.
One deal, yeah, in the beginning, but those were very small projects, right?
Right.
Very, very small project, a few $1,000s here and there, but that enough for us to keep on going.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And again, I think it's very important to test your idea, even though it's a small monetary value. It helps you validate your idea in the
Yeah.
market that
Yeah.
maybe this is something that people don't want, or this is something with a
Yeah.
high demand.
Yeah.
For example, the scanner you're talking about, that could be a high demand in the market.
Yeah, yeah. And once you go and use some other system and you tell them that, okay, we are using some other system, but we are developing our own system,
Right.
which is going to be better in so many
Right.
ways, right?
So you talked about sales or marketing. Can you tell us about a story, the most memorable one, probably when someone said no, and I think you mentioned in our pre-interview that even though when someone said no to you, you just kept calling them, kept
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
maybe one day you need our service.
Yeah, well, I mean, I whenever I would call somebody, I would, you know, in my mind, I would always know that they definitely need this service or product, right?
So you have done your research prior.
Yeah, yeah, and because if I know, for example, that this company or this person, they do not need our services or product, then I don't call them again.
Right.
So there's no because I don't really like to push for something that they don't need, right?
Right.
But if, for example, they have a need, but they are skeptical, for example,
Right.
right? So then I would go back to them and say that, okay, just give us a chance. Let's do a test run. Let's do a test run for free,
Right.
right? And if they have budget problems, then I say that let's work together.
Right, I see. Maybe a financing or I see.
On we can reduce the cost.
Right.
We can pay for the travel ourselves. Things like that.
So you are really there as a service provider trying to resolve their problem, not put money first with a service mindset.
No, money would always, even today, when clients, some of the clients, they talk to me and they said that, okay, the system is this much and that is expensive. We always work with them, okay, let's look at your budget. Let's look at, what we can do. And the important thing is that, you get the product or service and you're happy with that. Right. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So maybe tell us about what are the biggest challenges there when you started developing your own scanner. I guess you have to basically start from scratch. That requires knowledge, testing, probably people as well, and then patience.
And patience, yes, of course. And as I said, I was very lucky to have the people we have right now: Justin Gagnon, J.U. Wong, right? And they were very, they have always felt kind of ownership, in the company, and they have always they always come up with new ideas. Okay, we have this problem. Let's try this. Let's try that. If there is a problem with the algorithm, let's try that. If there is a problem with the code, let's try that. With the mechanical system.
Do they have actual ownership through equity or anything?
No, not.
But they have that
sense
of ownership because you care about your employees, like you mentioned earlier. Okay,
yes.
I see.
And they care about me, about the company, same way.
Right.
It just goes both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great culture in a company.
Yeah.
Now, maybe let's talk about hiring. So When did you start building your team? Is that when you decided to hire people when I want to develop the scanner, or you have a team already before
Um,
that?
well, the team was already there.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, because of course we were providing some services
Right.
before that,
Yeah.
and so the team was already there, and we started with of course there were some iterations. We started with something else, and then a different kind of a scanning system, and and then we moved to what we have now,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And the
So
algorithm.
when you decide to hire people from, I guess, from the market, what was on your mind? Like now, basically, you are handing over a portion of your business that
Yeah,
you are excellent at to someone that you
someone
basically
else.
have no idea about. What was going on in your mind? I just want to dig deep into that.
Well, I mean, um, the most important thing for me was that the person, whoever, the people who work for the company are passionate about this type of work, right?
Right,
And I'm a very hands-on person, right? I do
right.
everything. I do soldering. I
Yeah, I can
do.
see that every time when I came to your office, you were busy with something in your hands.
Yeah, I write software. I do everything, right? So and that's what I wanted from the people, right? So
So you hire on passion first.
yeah,
Right.
passion, and believed in the company, and in the products and the services. Um, so I asked a few friends and also, since I'm also a teacher, right? And I always like to work with younger people because they are enthusiastic, right?
Right,
about
right,
about learning, and about so that was my idea, right? So I wanted to hire fresh graduates,
right,
right? So
right.
that we can learn together and
Okay,
build
excellent.
build the
Yeah.
team from scratch. um so
So that's how you started building your team.
yeah,
And then the team started working on the research and development project for the scanner.
yeah,
How did
yeah.
that go?
Well, it went really, really well, actually. When I wrote everything down, the requirements and the so from my past project management experience, I thought it would take about 18 months, about a year and a half to finish that. And they were able to finish the first version within, I think, within the 6 or 8 months of
Oh, wow,
starting.
that's very impressive.
So very, very impressive. I was very happy, very, very happy with that.
So
And
that enabled you to put your product on the market much sooner than you anticipated, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
started. Is that when you started generating revenue from the scanner?
Well, actually, at that point, we were not selling. We didn't start selling
Okay.
because what we wanted to do is to first test the equipment ourselves very
Right,
aggressively,
right.
right? So what we started doing was to we started using our equipment in our service contracts,
Right,
right? And only when we became comfortable that okay, this works, right,
right.
in underground mines, then we started selling.
So basically, you were using your own prototype or products
Yeah,
to test in a real life environment
yeah,
and then see if this works. Maybe take notes from here and there.
yeah,
This doesn't work, that works. And then you come back to the
yeah,
office and revise the design or change the parameters. Is that
yeah,
how it works?
yeah, absolutely. And not just the working, because we knew that the system works, in principle, this, but all those smaller details, like and you are in the mining industry, how things work underground. So it's a very rough environment,
Right,
in terms of the agility of the system, in terms of how um, what happens if you have spraying water, what happens if there's a lot of dust,
dust, yeah,
what happens
wind.
if somebody drops it on the floor, you know
Right,
all
right,
those smaller things, how easy it is for somebody to learn, right?
right,
How
right.
easy it is for somebody to do a small repair,
Right.
on the spot.
Right.
All those small things that we learned over the years.
I see.
Yeah.
So that's when you were still kind of doing services. Were you profitable at that time?
No, we were not profitable. We were barely surviving.
So this was probably a couple years into the business already, and
Yeah,
you're still not making
not making
money.
money.
What what was your wife saying about this? How was
Always absolutely supportive, very, very supportive. I mean, my wife and my children, they have always been extremely supportive. And they said that, well, you have to make it work.
so you have how many kids?
Three
Three.
children.
So you have 3 kids, and then were you taking a salary from the company?
No, I was
Or
not taking a salary, but I was teaching part time
oh, you were
at
teaching part time
Laurentian.
to supplement
Yeah,
family
family
to supply
income.
for the
And
family.
my
Okay.
wife has also been teaching at Laurentian.
Right, right.
So
Oh, okay, I
part
see.
time,
Right, right.
also
That's
part
how
time
you manage financially, because
financially.
still bills have to be paid. Kids
Yeah,
still have to
of
participate
course.
in extracurricular
Yeah,
activities.
of
Oh,
course.
okay, I see. That makes sense. And so after that, you refined your scanner, and then you finally came to a stage where, oh, this is a product that we can probably sell on the market,
Yeah.
or uh, some company can just use the scanner and do their own scan.
Yeah.
Tell us, how did you find your first customer?
Let me think who our first customer was. Let me try to remember.
Or the
Uh,
first one of the first clients that you
y-
managed to persuade that this is a new thing, but I think this is
yeah, I think the first clients was a company in China. Now I remember. So they bought 3 scanners from us.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Just curious, how did you reach a client almost
in China,
on the other
we
side of the world?
yeah we met them in PDAC in PDAC.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we built a relationship, of course, and then we went to China, and we signed a contract, and they bought 3 scanners from us. And the we wanted to move um, to building a lot more scanners for the Chinese market.
Right.
But then later on, it didn't work out on pricing issue.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
see.
so we couldn't make it work. Yeah.
Okay, so so that's one of your first clients, and then after that fell through, you still got to survive. You still got to sell your products. Where did you go next?
Our next customer was our distributor in South America, in Peru.
Okay.
Yeah. So
How did you approach them?
well, actually, we went there is a trade show called Perumin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Peru mining.
it's a very big mining show
Right, right. Yeah.
in Arequipa, in Peru. So we went there with the Canadian delegation, and
So that's sponsored by the government, or?
no, you still, yeah, the part of the money actually comes from the government, and then you still have to pay for your travel and everything, a
Right,
part of the for the booth and everything.
right, right.
So you still have to invest money to use that service. So yeah, we went there, and the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines were there, and they introduced us to the to International Wheel, a very large distributor in Peru.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we talked about the product. They were very excited about the product because they knew what the problems were in underground mines. So, and then but it took almost a year to
To close the deal.
to close the deal.
Why did it take so long?
Because one of the issues was that they wanted us to come at our own expense and do demos at different mines. And at that point, we didn't have resources to do that
Oh,
kind
I
of
see.
yeah.
Is that actually, I remember, is that when you went to the pitch 2015 at NorCat here?
The
Where it's
pitch,
kind of like a Dragon's Den show where you went
yeah,
there, pitch your idea, and
yeah,
then hopefully someone from the panel
yeah.
will decide to invest in your company.
Yeah, yeah. No, that yeah, no, that was before that.
Oh, that was
Was
before that. Maybe
before that.
tell us about that story.
Well, it's an event that happens every year, and
Right,
they select, I think, four or five, startups to pitch their idea for investment. And I pitched an idea of a very low cost laser scanner.
right.
Um, and But unfortunately, I didn't get any investor uh, from that show. But the good thing was that I got a lot of exposure.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of media coverage.
media
Well,
coverage. Yeah.
probably the panel members would regret today knowing that how well the company is doing now.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So uh, then you developed your scanner. Now you also wanna. You mentioned in the Extrada's case when you were doing the scope scanner, you wanna do the drone survey. But at this
Yeah.
time, can you mount your scanner on any market drone, or do you have a drone solution yet
Yeah,
at this
so
point?
we started with there was a company called 3DR. They still exist, but they don't make drones anymore. So we and they had an open platform, which means that you can change the software and you can write your own routines.
Oh,
Basically,
okay. It's kind of like
uh,
an open platform you can
open
use. Okay.
platform for the drone. So we purchased that system, and we started working on that system. But we very soon we realized that for various reasons, I don't want to go into that. This system was not suitable for what we wanted to do.
Right,
Right.
right.
So then we started using another platform that was available off the shelf, again, open platform. And the reason why, again, we used the open platform was because it allowed us to change a lot of things in the hardware as well as software of the drone.
Right.
Right. And
So what are the, I guess, the biggest challenges when you started, modifying or developing your own drone model to work with the scanner,
well,
particularly for an underground environment?
well, in underground environment, one of the key things is is that the drone should not be too big, and it cannot be too small because then its payload capacity will be too low.
Right.
It should be just the right size. And then the should have good lighting. The radio um, should be strong enough, right? So for example, we modify the radio,
The
right?
power.
The power of the
Right.
radio, instead of 25 milliwatt, which is standard, we go to 300 milliwatt,
Oh, okay.
right? So
I
that we
see.
can go,
You have a
uh,
larger range.
larger range and on line of sight, right?
Right, right.
Operation. The other thing is the constraint was that, of course, the payload capacity should be there. There should be collision avoidance
Right,
on the system, configurable collision avoidance, because underground mining environment is different.
right. So
Um,
basically adaptive collision
Adaptive,
avoidance.
yeah. The scanner should be mountable on top and also at the bottom of the drone, right?
R- Right, because you want to scan both ways.
Both ways, yeah. For example, if you want to do a topsill survey to
Right, right,
look at undercut, right? So
right. I
you
see.
mount at the bottom, and right. So and it should not set off a lot of dust
Right, right.
when it is
I
moving.
see.
Right. So all of these constraints had to be taken into consideration. Right.
What about navigation? So you mentioned collision avoidance, but underground there is no GPS signal, as we
There's no
understand.
GPS. Yeah. So, I mean, now we are in a phase of going to a fully autonomous system that we are currently developing. But at that time, it was all manually operated.
Oh, okay.
Everything was is
So the operator actually has a console to see real-time feed
yeah, real time
of the
feed.
image and then
Yeah.
control from there.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly,
I see.
exactly. Yeah, and it worked well, for all of our service contracts, and it worked really well. There was no issues. But now, of course, the trend is that we should have, everybody's talking about autonomous operations, bringing people out of the mine, you know. So that is something that we are aiming for as well, right? But then there are, of course, a lot of ifs and buts there, because you're talking about a flying machine having a mind of its own,
Right, right,
flying in narrow cavities with people around.
right,
So you have to be extremely, extremely careful
right,
as
right,
to in terms of functional safety of the system. The design has to be really, really perfect, because these propellers can really hurt people.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you tackle that?
Well, we are tackling it right now
Oh,
as we
okay, I
speak.
see. As
We
you are
have
going to fully
fully
autonomous.
autonomous system.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, I
yeah,
see. Yeah.
yeah.
So what
So I
are
want
some of the challenges you're experiencing now as you are developing to a fully autonomous model?
Well, the fully autonomous system that we are working on is based on, of course, the expert system with artificial intelligence built in, and
That's a buzzword, by the way,
it is a
right now.
buzzword.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know everybody's doing that.
Right.
Um, and the reason, of course, is that the mining environment is extremely different and also very hazardous,
Right.
right? And and it's extremely difficult to build a system that is not based on expert system and have all the parameters so finely tuned that no accidents can happen. So this is
Right.
very
Right.
difficult. It's much easier to build an expert system and train it in the particular environment. So, and that training part, of course, is a bit challenging. Yes,
Right.
because you need to have a 3D model of the mine, or different types of mining environments,
Right. Right.
which we can develop, and we actually have tens, actually hundreds of models already from our service contracts,
Right. Right. Right.
right, that we
I
can
see.
utilize,
Right.
right, to
So that you're talking about in a simulation environment
yes, it's
or
it's
in a physical kind of a testing environment.
yeah, well, actually, whenever you do a scan, you build a model, right?
Right. Right.
And you can use that model to train the system,
Okay, I
right?
see. Yeah.
And of course, uh, it's kind of a simulation, of course, right?
Right. Right.
Because you are you're giving as input, you're giving some inputs, right? And then you have some outputs, then you have a feedback
Right.
mechanism there, right?
Right.
And it's
To help
continuously
learn the
running,
right. Right. I
right?
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the core of artificial intelligence and
yeah,
machine learning. So it
yeah,
feed, so it's basically like teaching a child
yeah,
how
exactly,
to do certain things, and you
exactly.
got to teach the child the basic,
Yeah,
and then the child can slowly develop language skills, motor skills on
yeah,
their own mind.
yeah, yeah, that's
Okay,
true. Yeah.
I see. What is your business model at this point? You
Yeah,
primarily provide services, or you are ready to generate significant amount of revenues from your drone now?
from the sales, of course, we are selling more and more now as compared to before, and but we also want to keep on providing services, at least maybe at a smaller scale than what
Right,
we are doing,
right.
because we want to concentrate more on developing
Products.
products.
Right,
um, and for example, we are working on a new product for shaft scanning, to develop a system that we permanently mount on a skip, on the top of a skip, and scan the shaft as the skip is moving.
right, right.
So this is the kind of research and development that we want to keep on doing, right?
So you got these directions of research and development from clients' feedback or
Yeah,
oh, okay, I see.
yeah, yeah. Most of these are now from the clients, coming from
Okay,
the clients.
I see.
From Valley, we have actually three projects that are currently going on.
Oh, wow, that will keep you
One,
very busy.
yeah, yeah. So, and that's the thing, right? So, no, the services, um, it just takes a lot of time. They
Right,
take a lot of time, and becomes difficult sometimes to concentrate on
right,
research and
right. With
development, right?
very limited
Limited.
resources. Yeah. So now at this stage, you had this product available for sale, and then you also provide services, and then your team is still a fairly small team. So I heard from some customers that as you grow, as you sell more products to these different customers, they may have all kinds of questions or help or technical assistance requirements.
Yeah,
But with the small team, they don't always feel like they
yeah,
are taken well care of uh,
yeah.
during the process. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I know that all of us are most of the times overworked, right?
Right,
And as I said, I've been very fortunate. I mean, these guys, they are putting in a lot of effort. They know that this is a very crucial stage of the company,
right.
and once we are past this stage, and we have a larger revenue coming in, we can hire more people and just develop a service department, right, that just takes care of that, and they have more time
Okay,
to
excellent. So
concentrate on
that's good.
development.
So you are recognizing the problem and you have
Yeah.
a roadmap already. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yes,
excellent.
absolutely.
And then at some point, you landed a big contract with a giant mining company here. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah, we were asked to submit a request for a quotation for a 3-year service contract
Right,
for 6 Valley mines. So we put it in, and we were fortunate enough to win that contract. So this is our first year, end of first year in that contract, and it's going really well. And every week we have some jobs that we do at some mine, some Valley
excellent.
mine.
Right,
Yeah,
right. That
this
will
is,
definitely keep you busy for a while. So
yeah,
3 year
yeah.
contract.
It's a 3-year
I see.
contract. Yeah,
And now you can afford a bigger team and more research and development efforts, and also,
yeah,
like you said, customer service
yeah.
efforts.
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excellent. And
Mm.
then, so maybe tell us the day you actually heard or knew that you were closing the deal with Ballet. What was going on in your mind?
Well,
How
it
were you
was,
feeling?
to be honest, I wasn't expecting, because, there are, of course, other providers, and they are really good at what they do. And they have been providing services for many, many years here. And we were up against them, right?
Right, right,
And I wasn't expecting, but then when they called us for for a discussion on the project, and on the contract, one thing that stuck out for them was that we were continuously working on innovative products. We were constantly developing new ideas, new products, new processes. That was something that they really, really liked, Valley. And they said that, of course, there are other providers, but they have some products that they have been using, and they will continue using those. But you guys are coming up with new ways of doing things, which we really, really like,
right,
right? And you can improvise, you can solve our problems
right,
the way others probably are not willing to do. They can, but probably they're too busy,
right.
with
And
other
that's
stuff.
at the
Yeah,
very core of ClickMox. You always keep the business model providing services at the same time, research and development to
yeah,
continuously develop new products or
new
improve your
improve.
existing products.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, excellent.
absolutely.
So, did you feel kind of a sense of validation or joy or
Yes, everybody, all team members, we all were very happy with that, you
yeah,
know, and that's what we said, that we have done work in the past for Valley, and they were happy with us, and they have seen our products in working, and they like the way we work. So I think we think we are on the right track.
That's excellent. That's
Yeah,
great recognition of your
yeah.
team's work. So, what is your next milestone? Now you have this big contract that can sustain your development efforts. What is your next milestone?
Well, the next immediate milestone is to finish that shaft scanning system that I told you about,
Right,
because there is a huge market for that, and we have already been contacted by large contracting companies.
right.
I won't name them here, but there is a lot of interest for that
How
product.
how did you market yourself? For example, this brand new product that no one has heard about
Yeah.
to your potential clients.
Well,
What are some of
actually,
the strategies or systems you have put in place?
well, basically, in this particular case, what happened was that the person in charge of the innovation in that company knew me personally,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And
I
he
see.
knew that we develop new products, and they contacted us.
Oh, okay. I
So we
see.
didn't have
Yeah.
to go to them. But then, of course, whenever our team goes on a service contract, they always ask them, is there a problem that you're facing? Is there
Oh,
something
okay. I
else?
see. Right.
Right?
Listening,
Yeah,
active listening of the customers.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that has helped us a lot, right?
And
For
they
example,
bring back the feedback to you, and then
yeah.
okay. And
For ex-
what do you do with the feedback? You because there
yeah,
might be a gazillion things from
yeah, yeah,
your customers.
yeah. So we evaluate, right?
Okay.
We sit down and we say that, okay, well, this mine has this particular problem. For example, we found out that one of the mines has these ore bins,
Right.
right, with liners and bolts, and that they have been visually inspecting, right,
Right.
and which is a very cumbersome process,
Right.
and not very accurate either, right? And they said that can we just do a scan of those ore bins and figure out the wear in those liners and the bolts? And so we came back and we said that, okay, well, this sounds like an interesting project, but first let us figure out how many mines have this problem. So we started talking,
Oh, okay. I
right?
see. You
We
kind of
said,
take that idea from one client and then consult with other clients and say, yeah, do you
yeah,
guys have this problem
this
or
problem.
that problem?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
And
see.
we
So that's
found
your
out
approach.
that yes, it is a problem faced by many.
Right.
Okay, so and we said that, okay, we can solve this problem. So we have just actually finished building a rig for that, to address that issue, and we are going to do the first test at Valley very soon
Okay. Well,
for that
excellent.
project.
That's great. I'm glad to
Yeah,
hear you're making
yeah,
great progress in that.
yeah.
So, what is your vision for Clickmox, say, in the next 10, 30 years?
Oh, 30 years. So, yeah, I don't really think that far. Yeah. Well, the vision, of course, is to become basically the go-to place for any kind of uh, you know inspection and surveying and mapping needs for the mining industry. But then we want to go full scale in IoT, in the Internet of Things,
Right.
right? Building machines that are autonomously working in underground mine. For example, we are building a ground vehicle, a small ground vehicle for some clients in South Africa, where they have narrow vein mining, right? So
Right.
the veins are extremely narrow. So and they have this issue of mapping those veins, which is
Oh,
extremely
okay.
difficult with
Right.
traditional systems. So we are building a small vehicle with a scanner on that will autonomously go and keep on mapping those veins. So
So you
that
use
kind.
imagery analysis, or still it's a
No, it's
lidar
laser,
based
with the lidar based.
laser? Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
I see.
yeah. That's the. But that's the the goal that I have in mind at this point, to become a full IoT provider.
That is a great vision, but I realize there's a lot of companies out there that are utilizing artificial intelligence, IoT, industrial Internet of Things, and
Yeah.
machine learning. So how do you differentiate Clickmox?
One of the differentiating factors is that, for example, we build our own lidars, for example, right? We write our own software for that, right?
Right,
And so we have a lot of freedom in terms of what we can do there, as compared to another provider who just purchase a lidar from somewhere else and use that,
oh,
right?
okay, I see.
So we can
So you
do
have total control of
total of
your
the system.
software hardware interfacing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So this is one of the differentiating factors. And then, of course, we have a client base already, right? We have clients who are waiting for our products, right?
Right, right,
And what we try to do is to always go for something which is different from what others are doing,
right,
right? For example, a small vehicle. A lot of companies are building small vehicles, but a lot of those vehicles have these problems of going over obstacles and going on steep slopes,
right, and
right?
they can tip over.
They can tip over, right? So, for example, the vehicle we are developing has six wheels, you know, independently operated, right? So it can
6-wheel
balance
drive.
six-wheel drive. So it can be independently operated, and it can balance itself in very difficult environments, right? Yeah.
Right, I see. So, what are some of the lessons or advice that you would like to share with our audience members that are probably starting out or still working in a corporate environment but want to
Yeah.
make a difference with their knowledge, skills, or their mindset? They are seeing this shift or disruption from technology. They
Yeah.
might want to do something, and what are some of the advice that you would give to them?
Well, I have a lot of advice. Okay. Yeah. The first and foremost is that do what you want to do, what you like doing. This
Right,
is very important.
passion.
Yeah. When you get up in the morning, you should feel happy that you are going to work,
Right,
right? You shouldn't feel burdened, right? So this is very important, right? The next is that you build a team around you, people who share your vision, you
right,
know who share your values,
right.
right? And who are passionate, who are also passionate about what you want to do, right? And then be persistent.
Persistent.
Just be persistent there. I mean, if you start a business, there will definitely be hurdles. You will encounter problems, countless problems every day, right? Just
Right.
never ends. But just be persistent, and then you will eventually you will succeed.
Excellent. Thanks
Yeah.
very much. And so, where can people find more about you or your company?
Well, we have this website, clickmox.com, clickmox.com, and there is information about company, the products and services, and there's I think a little information about team as well. It's incomplete, but there is some information, and
Yeah, by
um,
the way, I checked the website. It looks beautiful.
yeah,
Whoever
thank you.
designed your website did an
Yeah, yeah,
excellent job.
yeah. Thanks. One of our team members, Jesse Chensky, he designed that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned when you started out, you didn't have a mentor to bounce ideas off or get some guidance. Are you open to mentor younger people that may need a little bit help with career advice or uh,
Uh, Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I already do that actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
so a lot of young people and also a lot of older people my age and even older. They sometimes come in and ask me how to start a business, what to do, what are the first steps.
Right.
So I always yeah, give them advice and
So how can our audience members reach you?
the best is by email,
By
which
email?
is Naeem, Naeem, at clickmox.com. So they can email me anytime. Yeah.
Next section is actually my favorite, Minepreneur trivia. Downtown Toronto or Lakefront Sudbury?
Lakefront Sudbury.
Lakefront Sudbury. Good choice. Uh, Dominican Republic or Whistler, BC for vacation, or what's your favorite vacation place?
Well, I mean, my favorite is has always been Stockholm.
Stockholm.
Yeah, yeah, I go there. I have been going there often, actually. For some reason, I like that city a lot.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
PC or Mac?
PC.
PC.
Yeah,
Wolves or Sudbury 5?
Sudbury 5.
Sudbury 5.
Yeah,
You watch basketball?
basketball. Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
So, what is your proudest purchase under $500 in the past, say, 5 years?
Proudest purchase
Under $500.
under $500. I bought something, for my wife. So that was something that you know
What is it?
was a piece of jewelry.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
That's very
So
nice of you.
yeah, it's small.
Okay, so I think I want to summarize the lessons learned. Lesson number one: if you want to do something, don't wait until everything's perfect. Do it now. Number two: be persistent. Keep working on the people that say no to you. And number three: listen to your customers and act on the feedback
Yeah.
constantly. Number four: be agile. Pivot your plan when necessary. Number five: you may end up very differently since you first started.
Mhm.
Number six: enlist help when necessary. Seeking help is not a sign of a weakness, but rather a sign of strength. Number seven: clearly define your goals and clearly communicate with your team for best alignment.
Mhm.
Number eight: find a mentor that can help guide you through the most difficult times. Lesson number nine: family support and work life balance is important.
Yeah.
Number 10: do it. Some barriers may only be perceived ones.
Yeah.
So I think that's my takeaway from this interview. And
Okay.
as a special offer to Minepreneur audience, Naeem has offered a 10% discount on their latest feature product, Versa 3D scanner. So if so, maybe introduce the model to us. What does a Versa 3D scanner do?
Okay, so as the name suggests, Versa stands for versatile,
Right.
right? So and 3D for 3D scanner. So it's the probably the most versatile 3D scanner, versatile and compact 3D scanner that you can buy. It is designed for underground mines, but it can be used elsewhere as well. So the reason why we call it versatile is because it can be used as a stationary, high resolution stationary scanner as well as a mobile scanner. So you can mount it on a drone or on a ground vehicle and fly or drive the vehicle and it will do a 3D mapping of the area. Or you can use it as a simple on the tripod stationary scanner, or you can mount it on a post and use it as a CMS to scan stopes.
Excellent. That
Yeah,
sounds like a great product
yeah,
for especially underground mining environments where
yes,
people seek very versatile yet compact
yeah,
products.
yeah. It weighs only 920 grams, so
Oh,
it's a
wow,
very
under one
lightweight,
kilo.
under one
That,
kilo. Yeah.
that's great. So, for our audience members that are interested to explore Versa 3D, you can go to minepreneur.com/clickmox. That's minepreneur.com/CLICKMOX. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.